pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For the record, I have a list of the individuals that have accepted a position on this committee. And by way of roll call, I'll just go down that list. David Beckbar. Here. Robert Lee. Here. Kenneth Rando. Here. James Wacknitz.
Jesse Wacknitz. Here.
Jesse Wacknitz. I apologize. Diane Rion.
Here.
Kyle Bloom.
Here.
Ben Paccio.
Ben Pacheco here.
Pacheco. Joe Murray. Here. Cindy Kelly. Here. Susan Scott. Susan Scott.
She's absent.
Actually, I think I saw an email that she was going to be absent. Tom Swanson.
Here.
Mike Doherty.
Here.
Jason Cross.
Here.
Rod Fleck. Here. Cynthia Ward.
Here.
And on this document, I have a vacancy for the Olympic Forest Coalition, but I believe we do have a candidate.
Yeah, that's me.
And that is
Toby Taylor.
Toby, thank you very much. The next item that we have on our agenda is that we've opened up, we will open up the floor to public comment. Usually on the commissioners' meetings, the comment is for items that are on the agenda. The very first comment and the last comment is on any issue. One of the things that we're going to do at this meeting is to establish the officers for the committee. And so I've taken some liberty to make a little bit of a variance. There's no restriction with regard to the comments, so that anyone that has something that they want to share with this committee, or anybody that has thoughts about leading the committee, has an opportunity to express those thoughts.
May I ask a question at this point? Usually the first item of business at any meeting is considering the agenda. I think we should have a discussion of the agenda before we proceed.
And what's the purpose of that?
I have problems with some of the items on the agenda.
Why don't we do this, Owen? Why don't you present those problems as the first public comment? Please.
Okay. I do not think that the structure should be to have election of chair and vice chair as one of the first orders of business before we even have ground rules or process for figuring out how we're going to keep moving forward. That's the basic problem.
So it's a procedure or protocol issue?
Yes, it is. And I have a suggestion as an alternative is to have an interim chair in between now and the next meeting, use email to come up with a process, maybe use the ground rules of Forest and Fish or some other forum where there's clear divergence of issues. I would strongly suggest that a chair-vice chair is not as appropriate as having co-chairs that represent the divergence of views. And I'm not volunteering to be one of those co-chairs.
Oh, wait a minute. You got a good idea. You can make it happen. Is it anything?
If called upon, sir, what is that quote? Anyway.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any comments that they would like to make? This is the segment of the agenda that is open to comments. Actually, if it can be a little more formal, thank you, Toby, for introducing your name. As you make your comments, would you be kind enough to approach the podium and state your name and your address? All the word is being recorded.
Lastly, I think that the agenda is missing having introductions and going around the table.
Thank you.
That was going to be my comment. I do have some comments, formal comments I'll make later, but for those in the audience, I don't have a clue sitting around the table why they're here, who they represent, what their areas of interest are, who they're connected to. So perhaps the first order of business instead of a simple roll call might be to go around the table and have substantive introductions so we all know who's here and why they're here. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments, public comments that they would like to make? Please, would you come forward? And if you'd be kind enough to state your name and your address.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Connie Gallant, President of Olympic Forest Coalition, and I would like to ask the panel whether you are going to be considering having other environmental organizations on the panel that have submitted their names forward, because right now it seems like there's imbalance here on this particular panel. So I would like to hear whether you are considering the Audubon Society, Sierra Club, as part of the organizations that have put their name forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Bill?
Kenneth Riando, I'd like to echo some of the comment from Norma in that it would, seems to me, be helpful if we could go around the table and not only introduce ourselves, but state what our affiliations are too. So we can sit close here and we can understand how to interact in this process. Thank you.
And I think this is a really, really good thoughts. I don't want to protract the process, and I don't want to take the stage and respond to every question. So what I'd like to do, Ken, is let's gather as much feedback as we can from the audience, and then I am taking notes. I think the idea of the introductions is a good one. Next person, please.
Coleman Burns, 146 Thompson Road in Joyce, and considering that forestry has a big impact on fisheries issues, I think this body needs some people representing fish interests, and also considering that the tribes are involved in fisheries, I think this really needs some tribal representation. And I want to reiterate, I would like people to go around the table and when they introduce themselves, state their affiliation, who they work for, and who they represent.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Ann Seitzer, Palo Alto Road, Clallam County, and I am here as a property owner who lives adjacent to and downslope from DNR trust lands, and I'm not representing anybody else. Some of you know my former position with Jamestown, but I am not in any way representing the tribes today. But I am very concerned as a property owner that will be heard somewhere in this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak?
Carol Johnson, North Olympic Timber Action Committee here in Port Angeles. The makeup of the committee, I think, when you do introduce yourselves, will become fairly apparent that it's perhaps broader than what many might think. This is not a part of the sustained harvest calculation or considering any other west side DNR timberlands. This is an issue directly related to Clallam County timberlands. So given that narrow focus, I'm not sure we need to include every single environmental group or other timber industry group in the nation or in the state to consider the process of this particular group, which is really to bring forward information about the past, present, and future management of Clallam County forest lands under DNR management. And I think that's what we just need to keep a focus on. It does not go broader than that, and we're not advocating for changes in rules or regulations. So it's really an informational gathering of data directly related to Clallam County DNR managed timberlands. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak? Please.
Good afternoon, I'm Bob Sextro. I live at 573 Kitchen Dick Road here in the county. I represent the Sierra Club, although there are other members here. Just to divert a little bit, the Sierra Club is a local group, although there is a state chapter. We have a local group that I'm the chair of. We represent over 450 active Sierra Club members in Clallam County alone, so I think that deserves a seat at the table. And Audubon can speak for themselves, but they also are a local Audubon group, not a state Audubon group. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak?
Mike Doherty, 617 South Beach. So I support most of the comments made so far, but particularly under something that's 5 now, nomination appointment. Maybe we could discuss some of those items that were brought up under just organization. Particularly, the introduction sounded good, some kind of bylaw discussion. So for instance, to make sure we got a quorum, some kind of telephonic attendance, that sort of thing. And I think the county has a generic sort of bylaws for the 34 advisory committees. And can we have alternates, for instance? So if you can't make a meeting, maybe you could send an alternate to the group or something, since it's just advisory. Those sorts of things.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? You'll have another opportunity as we conclude our meeting today. I think the very last thing that we have is also public comment. Let me take on board the advice that was provided with regard to introductions. And correct me if I'm wrong, I heard affiliations. And did I hear anything else? So as people introduce, would you be kind enough to state the affiliation that you have? Joe, was there something else?
I was just going to say, I'd like to know where people are from, whether they're from the county or not.
Okay. So affiliations and location. And then
Commissioner, do you want to know roles with the organization as well, or just the organization you represent?
the organization you represent, but it's your opportunity to share. And I think there's two things that you're going to be able to do is to share with other people at this table how you feel about the work we're about to engage in. And also it's an opportunity to share with everybody that's in this audience how you feel. And I hope we can keep it brief, but no restrictions on the amount of time that you take to do that. Let me also add, can I see a show of hands on the number of people in the audience here that have read Resolution 70 that establishes this committee? Okay. So I recommend that as a document that after we establish the officers, that we do something to make available for those that haven't had a chance to read it. I think it will provide a little bit of clarification and focus. How about then if we use this next few minutes as an opportunity for our introductions, affiliation, and where we are from, beginning with, we begin on this side with Diane.
So I'm Diana Rayon. I serve as the superintendent in Coyote Valley School District, also known as Forks. I've been in that role for 9 years, been a resident of Clallam County now for 10 years. And I would say that I represent the school trust lands. And just am interested in getting to know everyone and what the issues are, and I'm happy to be here.
Dennis Riando, lifetime resident of Port Angeles and residing at West White River the last 35 years. Educated here locally, Municipal College, worked at Crown Zellerback, Port Angeles, and is involved in, ended as Nippon, retired utilities operator, forest owner, harvest 20 years ago, paid much taxes to the state of Washington, interested in forests as more than just a monoculture. I'm interested in diverse forests for multiple uses. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
I'm Toby Thaler. I'm a member of the board of the Olympic Forest Coalition, and that's the entity that I'm representing. I've been on the board for close to 10 years, something like that. My background is When I got out of law school, I started work for the Squamish tribe and worked for tribal peninsula tribes for a number of years, and gradually moved into environmental work and policy work. I've lived in Seattle since 1972, grew up in Spokane. My professional interest is focused on sustainability. I strongly favor adequate funding of schools and local governments, but not necessarily at the expense, definitely not at the expense of ecosystem values. And my advocacy here will probably be apparent, so I'll be explicit. We need to find other ways to fund local governments in this state, which has the most progressive tax structure in the country.
Rod Fleck, I'm the city attorney for the city of Forks and have been for almost 22 years, representing the city of Forks per the resolution. I'm not sure what's meant by affiliation, so I don't know whether that Norman wants to hear everything from which genealogy board of directors I sit on, but I also sit on about 4 of those across the nation, and also sit on the RECO board of directors, if that's the one affiliation you were fishing for. And our city's had a long history involved in DNR management, DNR timber management, but my interest in DNR actually goes back to when I was the vice chair for the King County Democrats Legislative Committee, and we were dealing with the DNR and ensuring adequate funding for schools and school construction and school remodels. So I look forward to the discussion.
And I'm Dave Beckerhart from down in the east end of Clallam County, born and raised here. Family's been here for over 158 years. I have a logging company and a ranch, and I was asked to sit on this board to help out with it. I'm excited about helping whatever I can, and I'd like to see things move forward. Thank you.
My name is Jason Cross. I'm a mathematician and a silviculturist at the University of Washington, although I'm not representing any university opinion or in any way officially representing the university here. I was asked to serve the North Olympic Timber Action Committee.
I'm Ben Pacheco. I'm a commissioner for the Clallam County Fire Protection District number 4. I've been a commissioner now for almost 10 years. I've been a resident for only 12 years. And I was chosen as a representative of the junior taxing district. And I have a degree in wildlife biology, so I understand where some people are, and I feel the same way about a monospecific culture, and I believe that there's good for all. But as a commissioner of a volunteer fire district, I understand the importance of taxes from the sale of county timber. So that's who I am. So that's why I'm here.
I am Cindy Kelly. I represent Clallam County Pomona Granges, which includes Swim Prairie, Mount Pleasant, Fairview, Crescent, Dry Creek, and William Valley. This is Granges in our county. I've been a Grange member for 30 years. I've lived in the county for 38 years. I've lived in Clallam Bay, Forks, Port Angeles. My professional job is I'm the manager of Dry Creek Water Association. I've been there for 26 years. I've worked on Water 18, 19, anything that has to do with the watershed. I also have background, worked for the DNR and the Forest Service and Olympic National Park. I also am a school board director in Port Angeles. I've been that for 14 years. Also served for 5 years on the Washington State School Directors Association, representing the school board directors from Neah Bay to Port Orchard, which includes 75 school board directors. Serve on many committees on the school board association, including trust lands. So that's kind of my background.
Good afternoon. I'm Kyle Blum with the Department of Natural Resources. Born and raised in Seattle, but I now live and work in Olympia. My job for DNR is the executive with oversight responsibility for all DNR managed trust lands, forests, ag, leasing, and I'm also the primary liaison to the Board of Natural Resources.
Hello, I'm Jesse Watkins. I work for the Port of Port Angeles. I'm the environmental manager there. Been there approximately 7 years. As you can see, I'll be representing the Port of Port Angeles. This is my first exposure, I guess, to forest land or timber management issues. I'm glad to be here.
My name is Bob Lipp, I'm retired, I don't represent anybody. Mr. Chapman appointed me and I applied. I wore my most expensive piece of clothing today. My wife and I looked for our son through the University of Montana. And I met a forestry professor in Missoula. And he said, if you can't practice sustained yield forestry on the Olympic Peninsula, the state of Washington, it cannot be practiced any place in the United States. I spent a lot of time with Ted Spolstra. I asked Ted to recommend me as a reference. I spent a lot of time with Curtis Winning. And I want to assure you that I have an open mind because I have some real questions about what we're trying to do here, but I don't really understand the problem. Now, I worked for a company that had 100 million board feet of DNR timber on the books at one time. So I'm not sure I understand the problem. So the last thing I want to say, and I don't mean to stick my finger in anybody's eye, but I'm an avid reader of The Economist. And every year they send out an annual issue highlighting issues around the world. And the one that caught my eye was a poll that The Economist made international. 87% of the people who responded do not trust government. And that's a real sad comment. So I'm here to see how this thing is going to work. Thanks.
So I'm Mike Doherty. I think the Democrats were Republicans, Democrats, I'm not sure. So I was raised in Clallam County, educated in Clallam County. As a kid, I hiked all the beaches, backcountry an awful lot. And then my wife and I raised 3 Irish hooligan sons here, and they did a lot of the same thing. Younger adult life, I started teaching business law at Peninsula College, and I taught business law and American government for 21, 22 years, something like that. I had worked at Rainier for at least 3 full years and several summers. I worked graveyard, made a lot of my college money that way, law school money. And then as a county commissioner, I was active on the Timber Counties organization for whatever years I was, 20, 15, 19, 20 years. And was probably the most active letter writer on that group as far as questions like a river ridge and other issues that came up in most of the timber counties. And I think there's about 21 or 22 still in that group that lobbies in relation to some of the things we'll talk about. I was probably most active in bringing U.S. bioenergy out of Clallam County, and for at least 4 years I lobbied the legislature about biomass, cogen, those sorts of alternate energy matters. So a little bit of background is kind of on all sides of this issue, but I'm grateful to get to serve on it.
I'm Tom Swanson, and as fate would have it, I'm the Republican Party.
That's agreement right there.
And we have a lot more in common than we have difference. I was born and raised in Western New York, moved out here to attend college at UW, moved to Port Angeles in 1985. I've worked for Green Crow since 1989. Raised my family here, 2 children who no longer live locally, but they're educated and employed, so that's cool. I have 2 passions. A very, very deep belief in sustainable forest management, and a very strong component of education. So that seems to be, this committee seems to be a nexus of those 2 passions. I'll leave it at that.
I'm Cynthia Bork, and I live in Forks, Washington. And contrary to local reporting, I work for the Forest Service, the United States Forest Service. I do not represent the agency in this capacity.
I've worked for the Forest Service for 37 years, and 18 of those years I was Public Affairs Officer for the Colville National Forest, and I was a silviculturist in hardwood country in Wisconsin and Minnesota, and now work for the Chief Information Office of the Forest Service, and that's IT-based. We provide the radio and cell phone and telecommunications for the United States Forest Service. I've lived in Forks for 10 years. I probably had the professor that he was talking about because I'm a graduate of the University of Montana myself. I am here endorsed by an organization referred to as the Forest Service Employees for Environmental Ethics. And that speaks for itself. I'm passionate about environmental ethics.
Joe.
My name is Joe Murray. I've lived in Clallam County since 1971. Lived in Tisch for the last 36 years. I have a background in silviculture, forest inventory, as well as forest policy, both here in British Columbia. I've pioneered some silvicultural practices for the growing of cedar, western red cedar, and minimizing animal damage. I'm looking forward to reviewing the county's forest lands, getting to know exactly which ones they are, and the discussion around sustained yield, because I made it happen.
Does anyone have any questions? Any of the members of the committee have any questions for members of the committee? The information was shared. Let's move to the next item on our agenda. Item 5 is the nomination and appointment of officers. And at this time, I will open the floor to nominations for the position of chair.
I would request that we address the issue that I raised about not having a structure that doesn't have equal chair representation.
You have that opportunity as the board is put together, and if you'll notice on item 6, consideration of endorsement of additional committee members was added in direct response to what you're concerned about. Not only would we had a request from 2 organizations, and I know Sierra Club is here, I'm not sure if Audubon is here. We've ended up with about 4 or 5 other organizations. And I had a conversation with the county commissioners on this issue. And the conversation made the conclusion that it is this committee's prerogative to make a recommendation to increase the size of the committee. All you need to do is open that floor for conversation, follow those rules, Robert's rules, I hope, that you use in these decisions, make your decision, and then bring that to the attention of the commissioners, and they can go through a process of an amendment to Resolution 89.
Mr. Chair, respectfully, I don't believe you're addressing my concern. My concern is not additional members. My concern is that the structure not be to have a chair and a vice chair, but rather to have co-chairs so that there is more diversity of interest represented in the leadership.
I've heard your concern, and your concern can be addressed through Robert's rules after the officers have been established and that protocol necessary to change the structure of the officers. So I return to my invitation. Are there any nominations for chair?
Yes, I would like to nominate the gentleman from Montana.
I'll second.
Bob?
You better be kidding.
Harry, help.
So,
You're a special person, Bob.
are there any other nominations for the position of chair?
I'll nominate myself.
Joe would like to be considered. And we have a second. Are there any other nominations? Any other nominations? I'll now close nominations for the position of chair. We have 2 nominees, and I would appreciate it if we can cast our ballots through a show of hands. The first candidate is Bob. All in favor of Bob as the chair, please raise your hand. And our count is 1, 2, 3,
Can we have a discussion on that briefly?
5.
I'm just curious if you actually wants it.
I'm shocked.
But do you want it? I mean, there's time, substantial time investment that I'm guessing will be involved between meetings.
I'm retired, so.
Okay, fair enough.
I got up to 5, and I think I was counting 6. Thanks for double checking that. That's a good idea. Can I again, by show of hands, we identify if you would like to see Bob as chair of this committee? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 6 votes for Bob. By show of hands, will you indicate whether you would like Joe to be the chair of this committee? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 8 people that have voted for Joe. As I see it, Joe has the votes to become the chair. Does anyone question this? Joe, at this time, I can turn the floor over to you. I'd like the committee to understand I am not on this committee. My only role was to get this committee up and running, and so at this time, I officially turn the floor over to the chair.
Okay, so I have a little unfair for this, but I guess we'll just continue with the agenda as it's presented here and ask for nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Bob.
I'll second.
Okay, Bob. Any others? Hearing no others, then all those in favor? Toby, did you have something? Hearing no other nominations, all those in favor of Bob as vice chair, raise your hand. That's pretty well unanimous. And then secretary, any nominations for secretary?
Nominate myself since I'm taking notes for 2 people.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, Rod, any others? Seeing none, all those in favor of Rod as secretary? So, going forward, barring any other changes, I'll be chair, Bob will be vice chair, and I'll be secretary. I guess this next section goes to Bill, introducing the Board of Commissioners' expectations.
What I'd like to share is that the board will make available the resource of a member of our staff to assist this committee with organizing notes, organizing meetings. An expectation that the Board of Commissioners has is that this is a very transparent process and that the public has access to everything that occurs at these meetings. One thing that you may consider is having information such as reports posted to a website, the county's website. That's your decision. But that is something that we can perform for you. Also, we're recording all of our meetings. And just one little bit of a housekeeping issue. Can I see from the show of hands anyone that has not taken training with regard to the Public Hearings Act? With Public Meetings Act? Public Meetings Act. 1, 2, 3, 4. So a thought for you would be, if it depends on how you want to handle that, Joe. One of the things I can do is I can reach out to the prosecuting attorney's office, and there is actually a video. It's self-paced, doesn't take that long, and that will serve as, it's really good training. The objectives, the expectations the commissioners have is that all of the members of this committee follow just exactly what that particular law says. We'd like to make that training available. And then the last thing, just real quick, is that the commissioners have agreed that individuals that are commuting to this meeting will receive mileage compensation. No compensation for meals, but the compensation that was provided for the members of the charter review. And I'll leave it to you on how you want to handle that, Joe. I see some of the people here have attended that, but there is agreement that compensation will be provided to the members of this committee. And with that, over to you, sir.
Okay, to address just a couple things. There's also a legal website where you can go for the public meetings training as well. And you did mention earlier, Bill, that we would be using Robert's Rules of Order. So if people aren't familiar with those, then maybe we can get some copies of those so we can take a look at them. And then as far as mileage goes, I guess folks will just have to turn in their miles to the secretary for their travel for each month meeting.
At the next meeting, I'll work with Cindy and bring in, there's a form the county wants you to fill out and you just write it out. So we'll have those at the next meeting. Cindy, who's been assigned to us, is at a daughter's graduation in Boise.
Right.
So we'll have those next month.
So I guess I have a question for the county myself. Maybe this question is premature, but we have traveled to and from the meetings. If we're going into the field, which I would strongly recommend at some point, will those miles also count, or will we just try and organize a carpool or a bus or something here if that's what we end up deciding to do?
I'm really open to organizing that service at no cost to the individuals, and with enough notice, we can try and draw on the vehicles that are available, but because people are coming from different directions, I would think that that's another entry that you would put on your vehicle reimbursement request.
Okay. Sounds good. Anything else on that? Consideration of endorsement of additional committee members. What is there's like that?
Well, I suggest that we simply ask the audience who's interested and then decide whether to act on it after we gauge interest.
I would disagree with my Warren colleague because I think it's a resolution that created the advisory board from the commissioners. So going to the process and procedure, I think the commissioners would have to amend that resolution to appoint folks. And I believe we've seen an inquiry from 3 groups, but Commissioner Peach said 4. I only saw emails from 3 as I recall. The Sierra Club had sent in a note. The Audubon Society and the Olympic Medical Center had sent in a note. Those were the 3 that I had seen with regards to asking to be considered.
Also at a public meeting, we had Cherry Kid.
Oh, okay.
Volunteer.
Cherry would be the city of
From the city.
Okay, so that was the 4th. Okay, that's why I didn't see that.
That's fine.
Councilor Angelo, I would note that Mr. Fleck brought the names forward for this committee, the basic members of this committee. So with that in mind, and the comments from outside groups for representation, I think we better keep an open mind here about who's represented. We need to understand, I understand the basic goals here, as I imagine everybody does, but let's not be too criticized along the way here because we have a lot of representation by people that want to participate. So we have a complete discussion. People don't criticize us getting included for being biased or not addressing issues that take important thing.
So I'm understanding the process here correctly if I'm wrong. We as a group would need to decide that yes, we want to entertain additional membership. We would make that recommendation to the commissioners, and then the commissioners would amend their decision previously.
If they voted for it.
Right. And then we would go through the process of selecting those members So I think the first thing we would have to do is decide if we want more members as a group.
I would tell you, I perceive a problem here too, in that one of the commissioners has already recused himself from any further action after the committee was formed. We have one commissioner who has stated publicly in the meetings that he is in favor of DNR continuing to manage these trust lands, and then we have Bill Peaches from the West End who has that opposite opinion. So, thank you.
Well, I just thought of another thing to consider before we consider that, and that's how we're going to make decisions. Through a vote, through consensus.
Motion and vote.
Motion and vote. Motion and vote. Simple majority? Yeah, we'll do that.
That's Robert's rules.
I have to ask a question. Are there some logistical concerns about increasing the size of this group? But we really haven't discussed the reasons why not to, and so, or anything about this decision. So I guess I would like a little bit more background on why this number was chosen in the first place, and and I am in agreement with my friend across the way that the public will look at this much more favorably if we open the door to some missing components and allow those voices. The decisions will be improved, the quality of the decisions.
Go ahead, Cindy.
I guess I'm concerned that if we continue to enlarge the group, it'll get more and more larger, and we'll get more elected officials who have their own agenda. And I think that many of us bring a very broad perspective, and I hope that because we're sitting here representing the group that we are, and I'm representing a lot of people, that I'm having that conversation, and the audience would be having that conversation with the people sitting on the committee, and that, we're here representing the whole county, and that we can do that. I mean, I just think that we get more and more people, that we're going to just keep growing this committee, and how we're going to manage the work we need to get done.
So I want to know, do we
There's a second,
currently,
Rod, had his hand up.
Well, and Ken had made some comment about that I had written in the names of this committee, and that's not correct. The Charter Review Commission had made a recommendation to the county commissioners to create a committee that had 12 members, is what I remember, that represented organizations and asked the organizations to appoint folks. So I don't think you can say I wrote in the names of the committee. I do think, though, the objective by the Charter Commission group that worked on that was to try to have representatives from different organizations who had expressed or engaged in DNR-related activities and management activities for some time. There was a representative chosen by the environmental groups as an open, and the two groups didn't, my understanding, respond. I'm not sure how the commissioners did the solicitation for that. I didn't follow that. And if we want to add those four groups, the Sierra Club, the Audubon, the City of Port Angeles, and OMC, I would say we could do that. It just, at some point, we've got to say, okay, here's the group and here's the work, because we have 1 year to do the work.
Yes.
so just in reading Resolution 70, it appears as though there are 17 positions that were approved in the resolution. I could be wrong. And then I guess I would just ask, are all of those really represented by this committee? And are there missing? And so if there's 17, which I think there are, recommended 16, okay, then would we need to make a recommendation to either increase that number, and ultimately it's going to fall on the commissioners as to whether they would approve that, and then the composition of that, would that also be our recommendation? That would seem to me that somebody would need to make a motion to increase this, make the recommendation to the commissioners to increase that number, and then we would need another motion to recommend to the commissioners who those people would represent, if we were to do that.
I think that was a good point. It seemed to me we would make the recommendation to increase the membership, and then when we see the results of that, just then entertain it. the individuals. And we also need a size. How many can, is it increased to? I personally think that with 16 people, it's already a pretty good size group. So,
I did have a question. I think I understand why the city of PA and Sheriff of Audubon would want to be at the table. What is Olympic Medical Center? Are they a public body that was
Junior taxing district. Member hospitals, courts, libraries.
Well, I'm used to private sector medical provision in Seattle, I'm sorry.
yes,
I have a question.
yes.
Are the Quillian Indians and the Indians of the Bush and the whole representative? Because they're going to be directly impacted.
The hose in Jefferson County.
Okay, all right, but where's the water coming from?
Well,
See, you see where I'm going with that, is where is the water? Because when we got involved in restoring the Forest Service restoring, and Rod, you were involved in that, restoring, funding to restore the Quilly water system, it was such a broad area. Now, I know the DNR land quite well. Are you saying that there's no need for the Quillians to be in, or the Bush, or the whole, to be concerned about the water quality?
I can say that.
Okay, is there any reason not to include them in this committee?
That's for the committee to decide.
You
It seems to me, well, we might be mixing apples and oranges here. We're deciding who is.
I'm here next hand up, that's my point.
We're going to decide based on information the best way to manage the county trust. We're not going to decide what the rules and regulations for those management is, because that's already been decided. There's 2 HCPs. There's the Forest and Fish HCP, and then there's the DNR HCP, and I think it's going to be important to know how those affect the management of those lands. But I don't think we're solving the water quality, forest practices issues. That's dealt in a total different place. We are just deciding what is going to be the best plan for managing county trust lands in Clallam County, and it's a Clallam County issue, not Jefferson County, not King County. It's our issue with DNR and the people of Clallam County.
Don't raise your hand. So I have a question for the body, and that is, I just have a sense of wanting to have all the interests represented well. So Olympic Medical Center is a junior taxing district. How many other junior taxing districts are at the table already?
1,
3.
2, well, 3,
Okay.
4, 2.
Are there any land types? One person come up and testified as a landowner. I assume many of you are landowners. Okay. The city of Port Angeles, it seems to me, has an interest in what's happening here. And the environmental community, does anybody else consider themselves representing the environmental community? 2 of us. 3. Okay.
Like the junior tax.
I want to fly a straw motion. Would people entertain asking the commission to invite a tribal rep, the city of Port Angeles, those 2? You can't make the tribes come and sit. But you can invite, and it seems to me that the city of Port Angeles has already expressed an interest, right?
That's one person in the city council. So, is that the body of the city council? I don't know that. Did they have the conversation? I don't know that.
I have no clue, but it seems to me that the largest municipality in the county sure has an interest. That's my outcome.
Jason?
So I was actually going to make a motion to recommend to the commissioners that we include the 4 that we had requests from. And and take a vote, and that we would make a decision yea or nay, and then move from there, which would be the Olympic Medical Center, which would be the City of Port Angeles, which would be the Sierra Club, and the Audubon Society. So and no more than 20 members in total.
Mr. Chair, I'll second the motion.
Okay. Moved and seconded that the request the commissioners increase the size of the committee to 20 to include 4 folks that have asked to be part of the committee. Is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Aye.
Sounds like we in favor have it. We have 2 favors. And as chair, I only vote aye. Okay, anything else on that? Bill, does that have to have a formal written request, or is that something you can get some help with one of your people for, or Rod, or
I think I'm fairly comfortable that we have this as a part of the oral record. If anyone questions when I present it to the members of the county commission, if you'd like to formalize that, you're most welcome to.
I'm fine with that.
And then what I would like to share with you is that what would occur, I can bring this issue forward on next Monday's work session. I'm not sure I can get it onto Tuesday's agenda, but the issue that there has been a little bit of discussion on, should you make the decision to do what you have just done, what would occur is exactly what occurred for everyone here at this table. There'd be a public notice that an invitation exists, and that has a certain amount of time that has to be advertised, and then we have a certain amount of time for response to that. And then what would happen is those responses would be brought back to you for your discussion.
Me or the committee?
The committee. Yeah. But as chair, you could share it with the
Yeah,
committee.
right.
Yeah. Okay. Joyce, I share that so that you realize that it is the committee that will select the respondees, not the commissioners. The commissioners will take a position on increasing by amendment to the resolution. Mm-hmm. But it is your decision, your committee's decision as to who are those individuals.
Okay, well, we just authorized organizations, not specific individuals.
Correct.
If the invitation goes to the organization, and the organization picks an individual, then do we have to approve that?
And life is real simple.
Yeah, okay. All right. Anything else?
So would that happen at our regular meeting? I would hope, because otherwise it'll drag it off.
Okay. Future meeting schedules and dates.
I guess before we leave that section, so I had asked if we had some way to have some bylaws or something similar. So, for instance, can we attend by telephone? Do we have an alternate in case we can't make it? Could that be maybe deferred at least to the executive committee, come back with a recommendation? And again, I think Trish Holden or Cindy have some kind of template orders.
And I would say maybe one thing, we can either find the template, or we could probably use the one that we recently, a group of us wrote on here from Charter Review. And if we circulate, redline those for this group, there are some parts in the charter one that we apply with for this group, and get those out as something we can take action on at the next meeting.
If that's okay with the chairman, yeah, you could go out by email to the next packet, maybe adopt them then.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. If the whole group's good with that, because I don't think we're going to go through all that here today. Okay, Philip?
Yeah, sure, when I received those, if there's any questions, I think we should have an opportunity to comment on them and then we'll discuss it at the next meeting.
Right.
I heard reference, like you mentioned, executive committee.
You don't have.
I was sort of assuming we might want to have the chair, vice chair, secretary as kind of executive committee to initially screen some things that are going to be on the agenda, kind of housekeeping committee.
Well, let's, rather than make assumptions, if that's a motion that you would like to bring forward, let's do it that
Okay,
way.
for the sake of discussion, I'll move that we consider the chair, vice chair, secretary positions as an executive committee to handle the housekeeping.
Second.
Can I, well, during discussion.
It's been moved and seconded that we have the chair, vice chair, and secretary of the executive committee. Any discussion? Yes, go ahead.
I would make a friendly amendment if possible to put myself on that. I have a strong suspicion that a ton of the work between meetings is going to be the executive committee working with me as a representative from DNR to figure out what data and maps folks need. So that would be my motion.
Well, that's an amendment to the existing motion,
So that's
so that
up to-
it would be up to those that made the first motion.
Yeah, I'll accept that.
Second, good with that? Okay. Does everybody understand that? Go ahead.
Is the executive committee going to have the authority to establish the agendas, the detailed agendas for the following meetings? That's the question. And if it is, then I would like to add myself to that also.
Well, I think the agendas would be based on what the whole group decides, and the executive committee would have a lot of input into that. But if you decided, or someone decided they wanted something on the agenda, and the executive committee didn't come up with it, I would entertain it. I don't think the executive committee would have exclusive say on what goes on the agenda for the next meeting if the group at large is, which is for,
Then I request that at the least, that the first item be standard under Robert's rules, that we review the agenda carefully at the beginning of each meeting, and that the agendas be sent out a week ahead so that we can have an opportunity to chew on them.
Rob, did you have something?
Well, I was just going to say, I think that's what we did with charter with the executive committee. They worked and got an agenda out a week prior, and they solicited at the end of the meeting from the members, is there anything we want to add to the next meeting? Someone had kept a list, a tally of these are the things folks have raised, and said this is what we think which should be on the agenda. Did we miss anything? And with that review the agenda requirement, you can always add if you get a majority.
That's fair, and I don't want to be on the executive committee.
Oh, come on, take one for the team, Toby.
One thing to keep in mind about agendas is you can have so many things on one agenda, you get nothing done. So I think that thought needs to go into the magnitude of the discussion and how much can actually be achieved in that amount of time. Rather than have a 4-page agenda and spend 3/4 of the meeting on the first item. I think we want to be as efficient as possible. You had your hand.
I was just going to say that that would be something we could include as a bylaw, that every member have an opportunity to request an agenda item through the chair, make it real simple, prior to any meeting, and then you would have the authority to look at the scope of work and say whether or not that's going to get in the way, but ultimately you want to visit that at some point.
Mr. Chairman? Yes. I'm confused, because I've got an agenda here, and then I've got a work draft, draft proposed work plan for the Clallam County Trust Land, and here's an agenda. Which one are we going to follow? Is this particular document null and void, or are we following this?
Well, it seems to me that it says draft, so I think it could be an item for discussion.
Okay, that's all I need to know.
Yeah. Anything else on the executive agenda?
We need to vote. We need a vote here.
Oh, okay. All those in favor of the executive committee as stated?
Yeah, which is chair, vice chair,
Secretary, and Kyle.
and this guy.
Right.
Okay.
He's a mistake.
And the state.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Aye, motion carries. Is there an opposed?
Pardon?
No, that is,
14-0 or 13-1?
I think it's 14-2.
No, I oppose.
That's what I thought.
Oh, okay. That's what I asked, you didn't say anything, so. That's what I thought. We were sitting there, I don't remember. Are we ready to move into dates and future meeting discussions? Yes.
So I can speak to the dates. This room is only open on very limited timelines. That's why the Friday that was chosen, the third Friday, was one of the timelines where we could have the room for a longer period of time available. It also has all the recording apparatus and et cetera. So that's kind of where we were steered to by staff, saying, here's the room, here's the location, you want all these other things like the copier and all, the suggested time would be this third Friday in the afternoon. There may be an idea to start earlier. I think there is the ability to go earlier. I'd say 9, Kyle. 8?
I can do as early as you want to do. Route them up and swimming at 5 every morning.
It's an internal joke between a couple of us. But I mean, at noon or go like noon, 11, it's a 3.5, 4-hour drive. January, February, March for some of these folks is a challenge to always get places. That way also they can get home before 8 o'clock was the other thought process of trying to do it early in the afternoon.
Noon is fine. Any earlier than that makes it real early for me. Not a fair schedule. I can't give you an exact.
Yeah, no.
What was the one at a time? Is everybody okay with the third Friday? We need a motion for that.
Make a motion that we convene on the third Friday of every month.
Okay, second?
Second.
It's moved and seconded that we convene on the third Friday of every month. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign? Sorry, I forgot.
I would just abstain. I may have issues with that, with my other commitments in London, so.
I said an issue too, but I think if we do telephonic attendance.
I'm in another meeting, the Washington State School Director Association Board.
What time is that in?
What time does it start?
Starter.
Starts on Friday.
No. What time does it start and end?
Starts at 2, usually and ends at 9 p.m. So, and I've got 3 hours to travel. So, yeah, but I'll have a week to look at the main schedule.
Question for Bill. Is there telephone conference ability here?
Correct. And I just would also like to share, a city brought to my attention, it is a hassle to select another meeting location that can seat the audience and record our meetings. It's a possibility, but it's not really strong with.
Yes, and I've been in meetings that has poor recording and communications, and might as well not have any, is to have some of them. Like, I was at one last week where there was a cell phone here, and that was it. There was a public meeting, so everybody else in the room, unless you had the cell phone in front of you, couldn't hear, or they couldn't hear you talk, so quality of technology is that's an requirement. So it sounds like we picked Friday and Cindy started trying to work on something there. Okay. The time. So Cindy needs to leave for a meeting at 2, and people can...
No, I need to be in Olympia.
In Olympia at 2,
So
right?
I leave at 11. Or, no, I can't meet on Friday.
Those are every Friday as well.
No, I just have to go through, I know the next one is on the 3rd.
That actually goes to the alternate issue. I move that we allow members to designate an alternate to speak for the table.
I've asked a clarification of your motion. A written designation
Yes,
in
a
advance.
written designation in advance to the chair.
To the chair.
That brings to my question, is this the same alternate? I'm just wondering if I have one person that's my alternate, it's going to be a lot more effective than if every time they need an alternate, there's a different person.
I strongly suggest that that's the intent.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded that we allow each member of the group to designate alternates for their position if they're not able to make a meeting for whatever reason.
With notice to you.
With notice to the chair. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So we got the date and the alternate, and now we need the time. It's 10 o'clock.
I mean, you do it at 10 o'clock, I'm up at Kyle's hour, which I detest.
I mean, the earliest noon or 11, I mean, 11.
So what do you do for lunch?
You just, when lunch is up, when either eat beforehand or eat after the meeting.
I would prefer to have it start at 12 o'clock. 12 minutes.
Is that a motion?
I'd make that motion. We start the meetings in 12 minutes.
Okay?
Second.
Moved and seconded that we start the meetings at 12 noon. Any additional discussion? That would be 12 noon on the third Friday of each.
That is correct.
With alternates designated. And telephone conversations. Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, now this is a little bit more sensitive. Consideration of topics, draft work plan, and future meetings. Well, I think we pretty well found out when we're going to have our future meetings. Now, this, I do give some reference to what will be around those situations. Yes.
Okay, so it's always fun to read about something in the newspaper and people make up what this versus what it really is. When the Charter Review Commission made its recommendation to the commissioners, then there was a work group that worked with the commissioners on a couple of things. One of the commissioners in one of those meetings said, if a few of you lay out not only what the committee should look like, and then somewhere down the road, someone needs to lay out how you would get the work done in a year. And after that, another commissioner said, how would you do that? And I'm like, okay, well, here's some suggestions on how to write a report. You have to cover certain things. If you look at resolution 70, it's very clear what our 2 questions are. It also says what we will address in resolution 70. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 things in that resolution. So I had made either a mistake or willingness to spend a few hours very early on Saturday morning to type up a work plan as a draft proposed for consideration for action either at this meeting or the next meeting. So I would say this is, what did you call it, a trial straw man,
Yeah,
straw person,
right.
to start a discussion. Yeah, it's like, okay, and so what the goal was to try to say, okay, if we're going to meet every month for the 1 year we are empowered to meet, and we have these certain things we've got to talk about, where would they fall on a calendar, assuming 1 meeting a month? Who might be needed to be there? Who might be guests that we're going to have to reach out to and ask to be there so we can give notice well enough in advance, or try to figure out if Toby thinks there's someone, that is an expert on HCPs, and Tom thinks there's another person, we can try to start penciling out who those are. And then expectations that might be in that discussion. And then also deliverables. Because again, we have to deliver 2 reports. 17 says we have to have an interim written report by the 15th of February. And a final report by December 31st of 2016. And so that's what this does. It lays out just me sitting at my desk thinking if I was to write a report that had to cover all these things, and I was only going to be able to deal with 1 potential topic a month, or maybe 2, the trust revenue and how it's generated could be in 2 or 3 of these areas, so I didn't call it out as a separate, because it flows in 2 or 3 of the points here. Here's one option. We only have a year, and so trying to figure out how to lay out some basis of writing something is there. There is specifically a month missing, because it was a decision point. If you made a decision, I think all the ones are there, but there's a block open. Because if you make a decision that the county should seek reconveyance, and that's in, and there's wording that we have to meet with regard to that and the question. So it's actually in resolution. If it's in the best interest and best greater interest or best great interest, depending on how you read those 2 sections of the resolution, there's a decision point. And one decision point is if that's a decision, make that recommendation, then you'd have to sit down and figure out how you would go about doing that reconveyance process. The resolution had, if it's not in the greater interest, then we have to look at this other question. And so that's what this does. It doesn't presume that the decision's been made, it just deals with the second question. And specifically said in the email that went out to Cindy that said it's I started at 4:15 in the morning, it's now 6:20, I'm going home. I realized I didn't do the second column. If you do reconveyance, you have to do here. If you don't do reconveyance, I try to say here's the other questions you might want to look at based upon this resolution set. So that's the purpose of this. It's a straw place, and it lays out a potential way of doing this. There may be others, and have at it. But that was the thought process.
I have a question for Commissioner Peach. So if there's an expectation for an interim report by February 15th, this committee will have only met, other than today, one time between now and then. What contents are you hoping for in that intermediate report?
Thanks. First off, there's flexibility in the deadline. A report that has no meaning, has no value. But the intent was to get an indication as to the direction the committee is headed, and here's the reason for it. If the committee makes a recommendation that there is a desire to pursue reconveyance, that reconveyance could be a topic for discussion with the commissioners as to whether it goes on their ballot. And because of the timeline associated with getting something on the ballot, it's very important to have an indication. It doesn't have to be the final answer. But if your indication is, your first report says we've looked at it, it's not headed that way, but it is headed a different way, we would appreciate knowing about it so that we can begin planning the auditor's office for a vote for another.
I have a follow-up question. What issue can the commissioners put on the ballot? You're speaking about November of 2016? What issue could the commissioners put on the ballot in November of 2016?
Tell me, the original conversation about whether or not reconveyance should occur took place during the charter review. And the charter review discussed the idea of having the voters of Clallam County weigh in on this.
So an advisory vote?
Correct. Correct. Let me be very clear. The voters of Clallam County can advise, but it will take a legislative action for that to physically occur. Now, whether the legislators want to engage, if the advisory vote is no, is different than if the advisory vote is yes. And that issue was discussed at the charter review, and what came out of that conversation was, this is not a simple question. How can we possibly condense it for a voter to make a decision on? Therefore, there was the recommendation to take to an advisory committee. Your conversations could result in work that condenses the issue.
So my memory of state law calendar for elections is, do you have to decide in August or something to get it on the ballot?
And actually, Toby, one of the things we considered was the ability to share the work this committee does with the general population. So if, as an example, presentations, Toby, if you made a presentation to whatever civic organization and other members do the same thing, well in advance of, say, endorsement or the issue coming to the ballot, the work we are doing has it has the benefit of it.
Oh, well, with that question, I'm ready to discuss some issues I think are missing. Is that appropriate at this point?
Yeah, I think if the group's interested, I think it's a good idea to go through this spreadsheet that we have here and see if we have milestones.
Do we need to accept this as a draft template and then we're going to mark it up? Do we have to make a motion? Do we need to make a motion to say this is the roadmap we're going to use for our meetings, and now let's discuss the elements of each meeting?
Well, I would suggest that's way premature because I think we need to make sure that all the issues that members of the board, including me, think are relevant to the direction from the Board of Commissioners are listed. Because if you start from this, it just gets really complicated.
Well, I asked because you're holding it up and asking to put elements in different boxes, so it looks like we are just then it's a framework. I don't know if we have any kind of framework yet, but the moment you're discussing changes, it would appear that we've accepted that this is we're putting things in boxes. Or not that we agree with these, just that maybe I'm missing it.
I understand your question more. Is this the type of format we want to go to put together a schedule, or because I don't know that this is the schedule, so we have to go through that.
Right.
But I think my opinion is a schedule similar to this would be beneficial for the group. So if we have to have a motion that says we are going to use a format similar to this, I'm okay with that. And then start moving things around boxes. And if that's the motion we'd like to see happen, let's make the motion.
I don't know if
well, you don't have to read it.
That's fine. I'll move that, at least for the purposes of having a meeting each month and discussing expectations, deliverables, who might need to attend a primary focus, that we have those be the elements, I guess, that we discuss, not necessarily any of the, without agreeing to necessarily any of the elements that are listed in the draft.
Okay, so you're basically making a motion to consider this format, not its content.
Yes.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we use a format similar to the draft that we have in front of us as a roadmap for the work of this committee, and making it clear that we are not accepting what's in this draft schedule without deliberation. Does everybody understand that? Any further discussion? Yes.
So I'd recommend you defer this for at least a month. This is a major issue. It's all about private timber, public timber, need to put throughput and mill, and just a lot of big issues. And some of it's grounded in Forest Practices Act and how the current managers do whatever they do within the constraints of the law. And to me, learning about those sorts of background issues is very important before we get this rush to conveyance. And I'll tell you, having been on the Charter Review Commission, there was a rush to get there. There were private, there were non-public meetings. There was a very small minority that principally built up a public comment record that was not from the general public. There were members of the timber industry, spouses, and others that testified. And that public record shows a lot of interest in getting to conveyance and changing management. but it was not a broad base of the public. It was manufactured, and I can show you the examples of form letters that came in. So to me, we should slow down, and there could be members on the committee who would like to get an optional field trip, go look at forest practices, act requirements on the ground, to see if DNRs get out as much timber as they can, giving certain restrictions, limitations right now. Are there some recommendations they have that are somewhat palatable to the county, to this group and the county? There are issues, I'd say, are segregable, like arrearage. Probably we can agree. Probably, I'm guessing DNR maybe will have some ideas on what they could do to solve that issue first before getting into the major issue of re-conveyance. So I think because of the disparity of the background of people on the committee, I don't think we should rush, but this is fairly typical of what I saw in the CRC. There's a rush to get to re-conveyance without people understanding the ramifications of something that major. And I can see this, to me, this is again a sign of this manufactured effort to get to that point. Now, Rod knows I have a very serious concern sitting on 2 corporate boards for 1 timber companies. And in the background, Rod has produced most of the material that came to the CRC, sample resolution, membership in the committee, background papers. As I recall, you said to our subcommittee, which I was not invited to all the meetings, but did come to a couple, that you had briefed 2 commissioners. And that was outside of a public meeting. So there are parts of this that are so fundamental to making good public policy that I think it should be slower, and board members should have the opportunity to maybe have, like DNR, Forest Service, put on an educational format of how timber management occurs, what they're doing, the harvest schedule is now, what are the limitations, restrictions, an optional field trip, which maybe many people don't need, but some would appreciate it, so it's purely optional. But a few of those kind of background educational opportunities before we rush to get to this one item.
So I'm going to deal with the first issue first. In order for Mr. Doherty's reality to be correct, we would have had the following things have happened. He keeps trying to insinuate that there's some involvement of Green Crow and others with this issue. And I think you've made that up in your own mind, sir. I think it's wrong. I think it's an insinuation or a statement that's inappropriate. This was sent out as a draft. You're not seeing me advocate that we have to do it this way. What you've seen me advocate is we're going to meet once a month. We have 2 very clear questions we have to answer by a resolution passed by the commissioners, and it has to be done in an orderly fashion. I will say I do resent the insinuation that there's some effort that this is going to lead to instant reconveyance. And here's the steps that would have to be. So I'm kind of curious how you think I and others have the ability to control this. There had been a recommendation from the Charter Commission that came up from a group of individuals who wanted to put it on the ballot. That was actually the question. Put the issue of reconveyance on the ballot. Now that's not what the subcommittee did. It made a recommendation saying don't put it on the ballot. Let's ask the commissioners to have a group study the question and try to educate folks on the rather complex nature of the question. And I think you were at that meeting when we talked about that at Clallam home. And then let's also say if it's not in the best, greater interest of the county to seek that, then how should the county be engaged in those activities? So the rush to reconveyance, I would say, didn't happen there. At the Charter Review Commission, it passed after deliberation to send that recommendation to the commissioners. The commissioners then had a series of meetings, changed and modified what came from the Charter Review Commission. I did talk to 2 of the commissioners over the period of a couple of months, like any other person can, like you have done, and like when you were commissioner, many folks came and talked to you personally on an issue, and then they went to the next commissioner and talked to them as well. And then you have to have we'd have to recommend reconveyance. It'd have to go to the commissioners. They'd have to agree to put it on the ballot. The voters would have to agree to pass that. The legislature would have to hold a hearing on that. It'd have to pass a House hearing, and then the House, the Senate hearing, and then the Senate, be signed by a governor. I mean, I'm a little confused from one person who also teaches government to another, how that's a rush on conveyance.
So just one thing I want to make clear here. The motion on the floor is simply to accept a format similar to this to prepare our agenda. We clearly stated that what this says is not part of the motion. We just are we going to decide or discuss what we're going to talk about at each one of these meetings. I just want to keep the motion clear in everybody's mind. Jason?
It sounds to, we have not voted on it.
Oh, we haven't.
No, we haven't.
It sounds to me, given the issues you've raised and the complexity of the issue, that a natural first discussion of what we're going to talk about at our next meeting would include a lot of the background that you're talking about. We have to have a way to get there on what is it. Does the expectation and deliverable of a January 2016 meeting include a field trip? How many presentations on the history of trust management and by whom? All of those things sound like great upfront next meeting issues that we have to decide to have without worrying about a rush to, at best, a year from now, we have to have a report that advises somebody to take an action or not, however well or poorly constructed they think that advice is, based on the composition of this committee or what they think was the poor composition of this committee. That'll be up to the commissioners. So we still have to get a lot of work done in 12 months, and we probably can't take January to just get, right now, maybe possibly discuss the addition of 3 more people than to delay another month. So I would guess maybe call for the vote on the motion.
Was his motion seconded?
It was.
Yes, it was moved and seconded, but I won't exhaust it again. So did you have a discussion item?
Well, I assume we're just voting on the framework, not the
Right,
content,
that's
so
what I
that's
said.
why I was willing to second it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, not what's in here.
And then,
This is just
after
a
we
draft.
adopt it, then we'll talk about content.
Right. Anything else on the framework? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We will use the framework to submit to us. Now, I guess we talk about what's in the box with this. And go ahead, Cody.
So I have a suggestion for how to approach this, and that is, we now have an august executive committee that gets to do some work in the interim. I suggest that we throw out the issues. People just express their opinion which of these items on this spreadsheet makes sense to include or not, especially not, and add other issues, and then they get to have a meeting in the interim, or 2 or 3, by phone, and figure it out. And I'll start by suggesting what I think is the key missing piece, because a lot of this, there's only a few things that bother me in here. It's mostly what's missing. So looking back at the communication from the Charter Review Commission dated July 6th that was handed out, the first paragraph talks about the importance of sustainable income flow. That's obvious, but the other item that it mentions is the need to have that flow of wood for the local economy in the mills. And I don't see a lot of that here, so I've made a couple of notes that summarize the issue, which I encapsulate as local economy. Source of timber for the local economy, that people understand. Half the table, you understand when I say value added. That's what you're talking about, right? The local value added. So source of timber, the revenue data for the local economy, and alternative sources of revenue to explore. Re-conveyance is, my understanding, the arrearage issue is a complaint that there's not enough revenue flowing And as I said in my introduction of myself, my interest in sustainability and supporting local economies is that we should consider alternative sources of revenue and the alternative to re-conveyance that would solve that problem. So source of timber revenue data should be very early. It should be part of the information that we have in front of us.
Mr. Chairman? My understanding from Ted Spolstra, and I'm quoting Mr. Spolstra, the original grant from the federal government to the state of Washington is so simply worded that it can't be broken. Does anybody have a copy of the original grant?
These are different lands than the federal trust lands with regard to that. These are the lands that the counties acquired in lieu of taxes, tax forfeitures in the 1930s, 1920s, and 30s predominantly. And then were conveyed to the state under a statute for the state to manage in trust for those, for the counties.
From who? From who? From the federal government?
No.
So this is Grace Harbor.
This is a very, well...
Yeah, it is. Grace Harbor has this. So thank you. Answered my question.
Okay. Grace Harbor is different than us, but...
Right.
Okay.
It's the same type of thing. We got there at the same time.
You know, some 3 or 4 of us are here.
Did you have a question?
Well, is it for some?
I thought I said your name.
If this is the appropriate time to request information or discuss, I guess I'd like to know perhaps from you the guidance of should we discuss what should be in January?
We need to have one conversation at a time. Go ahead, Jason.
Depending on the issues that people feel are important or not important and need to be brought up in what order, should we discuss what information we need for January?
That would be a good place to start. That's our next order of business is the meeting in January, and I think putting together some substance for that meeting would be beneficial.
If so, then I would make a motion that that the focus of January, or the primary focus of January, be state forest, the Clallam County Forest Board transfer and purchase lands, or the trust lands that DNR has on behalf of Clallam County, and the history of those. Some of these elements, I mean, it's the same one that is in this box, but that we get a history so we can address some of your concerns about people starting to wrap their minds around how we got these, any difference in legal wording between those lands and the congressionally appointed lands when Washington was admitted to the Union, all of that. So DNR trust lands be the primary focus of January. That's my motion.
DNR trust lands or the county trust lands?
County trust lands managed by DNR.
Okay. Let me make sure I understand. You want the focus of the January meeting to be a clearer understanding presented of the county trust lands that DNR manages for Clallam County?
Yes.
So, they already got that. Let's move to that. Tom?
Well, I think what we're talking about here is framing the problem. We've all been asked to serve on this committee, basically to analyze a public policy business case. And until we have all the equal understanding of the current situation, all of us have pieces to the puzzle, but nobody knows it all. And it would be nice, I think, that Kyle and his staff, and Olympia, some people from Forks, that could put together a short course on DNR trust land management, make up an agenda, and just present to the group so that we all start from a level playing field about the current situation. So I think that's what the motion is.
Yes.
I just said it in a little more detailed manner.
Yes.
Okay. Any more discussion?
I have something.
Go ahead.
I would like to see in that, and I agree, that basis needs to be laid, but I'd like to see a racing matrix or some kind of discussion or information about values at risk, values, and other resources, and where there's some conflicts in, transportation issues, things like that. I would like to see the DNR focus on some of those types of things.
I'm not sure exactly what you mean, so could you maybe help me just keep talking a little bit so I can make
Wildlife,
sure I bring the right thing.
recreation, you know, where the rub is with timber harvesting, where it's suitable, you know, is there need for restoration work, that's investment, you know, who's more capable of making those investments at, you know, at any point in time, and, you know, the benefits of the DNR handling that versus, you know, the county, because they have more money or whatever, or less money, I don't know. But anyway, I'd like to, you know, we need to understand the whole range of values out there, because there are so many, they're so complex, and they're important to the people in this county.
Sounds like you're looking for some of the things that are listed on the spreadsheet in the February meeting.
Yeah.
Because that's, when you're talking about that to me is a lot of what's on the table, at least in the February box. And I'm happy to bring some moving forward if that's what folks want to hear about.
So I think, as it pertains to this issue, your comment, I'm in favor of all of that, but a box for the January meeting is getting quite full here. And I think if we just had some education on the forest trust lands that are managed by DNR for Clallam County, that's a pretty full meeting. I mean, I'd like to see inventories of the lands, maps of the lands, where are they at? Just basically understand what the resource is that we are being asked to make a determination about, and then proceed with the questions that you're asking. So we want to make sure that we're not biting off more than we can chew and get nothing done. Right.
So another thing I was going to propose is for some folks, they may want a deeper background than some others. So one thing, for instance, the last work session, the Board of Commissioners, Bill Kitchell, who is facilitator or whatever for this process, presented probably an inch thick of materials, and then there was a reference to some other materials that some board members have as background for this issue. So there was a year of harvest records from DNR that are given quarterly to the Board of Commissioners. So things like that are available. As I recall, it was about 1999, there was about a 3/4 inch study of DNR and management by county and government. That, I think, would be great background for people. So, and there's a lot in between that's available. So if some people want more material, and they could have a 3-ring binder with tabs or something, that's available. Again, I think if you look back through the record of the CRC, the relations to certain boards of commissioner members, the drafting of the resolution that sets these artificial limits, do it within 1 year, have a preliminary report in 2 months, way too rigorous. I think the committee should consider in January, please, asking the Board of Commissioners, we can't do this in 1 year. Just too big a public policy decision. We'd like to take a longer period. It just, you know, it's a big deal. Some interests are in a hurry. I don't think the public wants a board like this of the commissioners to be in a big hurry.
Bill?
So the thought that share is information that's been gathered can be made available to everyone. And I've been talking to Cindy about just exactly what was presented at the last commissioners meeting, setting that up on a website, on the county's website. There's good and there's bad news. The good news is there's lots to read, and that in itself is the bad news. And so one thing we could do is we can get the process started by posting what we know. And then there may be some conversation among the committee about we'd like more. Maybe it's to do with other meetings on the same topic. Or is there a way to consolidate this, or how about a one-page executive summary on some of these documents? Because I've been trying to keep up with these as they come in. And I've got no issue with regard to the transparency. I can just share it with you. There's a lot of information. But I'll also share one other thing. I have prepared a calculation of the arrearage. And it's because it's the arrearage to Clallam County detailed by junior taxing district. And I did it because I was asked by a constituent what that was. It was specifically to do with the fire department. And I couldn't get the answer to that question. So I have a starting point for that conversation so that we know whether we're talking about 1 cent or $1 million. And that's one of the documents that we can make available.
There's going to be a talk about the information.
That's the problem with it, Joe, is maybe the executive committee can kind of advise, you know, of all of this, because I got about 50, 60 different documents.
Yeah.
Here's a couple you really should read about. As an example, if you want to start off with the trust plans, you know, the annual reports the DNR publishes are good reading. They're simple, it's 2 or 3 pages. It gives you a sense. You can read them over time. Your call.
Arrearage is something that needs to be addressed with more specificity in terms of what it means. It's a statute that I've had the joy to read many times, and it's very ambiguous, and I think it would be good to press upon DNR to get their opinion as to what it means, and perhaps other legal counsel. It's not as clear as some would think.
I don't know if anybody seconded, but there did have a motion to talk about trust plans in January, which we're having a great discussion on.
Right.
I also have some data requests for that might address Toby's thoughts or the ambiguity of some specific data requests for DNR. I don't know if we need to do we need to just hand those to the secretary and we compile a big list of the things we'd like and hand it off to DNR, or do we need to read them out loud and discuss them and decide if that's data we need? I guess I'm asking you, Joe.
Okay, well, I think the first thing we should do is finish any discussion we might have on whether we're going to spend January learning about trust lands, Clallam County trust lands, DNR's trust management of those. Is there any more discussion on that particular topic? Yes.
So a slightly different format would be to do this, but try to define the problem in the mind of some members of the public or the committee, whatever, and then look at optional solutions. Right now, we're tending to assume a problem, get re-conveyanced, it looks like from the schedule to me. Now, I know that's simplistic, but that's the way it's gone. And again, the record, and I disagree with Rod, the record of the CRC committee is a relatively small minority manufacturing some public opinion, which other CRC members, as Charter Review Committee, relied saying, I'm voting for this re-conveyance issue because the public wants it. If you look at who the public was, built that record, it's pretty one-sided. So I'm just saying.
The motion isn't about re-conveyance. The motion is about spending our time in January learning about DNR trust lands, and we'll get to conveyance at some point in the future, but that's not really germane to this motion from my perspective.
And I could agree to that. I'm just saying people should understand there is a fundamental flaw in the way we get these recommendations, and the proposed work schedule falls into that same.
Mr. Chairman, there's a motion seconded on the table. Can we vote? I think that starts this conversation with orientation. We've got to start somewhere. Can we vote?
Well, I want to make sure that everybody who has something to say about the motion, that we tend to be getting sidetracked, trying to prevent that.
I support the motion. I really think that in whatever order you want to tackle it, what's in the January and February boxes is the right thing. And regardless of what anyone wants after that, in terms of other additional data that folks want to get to help ground them, I think what's in the January and February boxes is critical to start with for this committee. It's the right foundational.
Right now, the motion is for January.
I know.
So.
And just the primary focus, trust lands.
Right. The motion, as I understand it, Ron, correct me if I have it wrong, is that we're going to be educated on the Clallam County trust lands that are managed by DNR in our January meeting.
When you said that, I have to just say something. Is that these big lands exist, not isolated from everything else. So there's got to be more of a broad scope when you're considering, what is adjacent to them, where's the corridors for travel, and all the kinds of things that so just looking at these blocks of trust lands is not okay for me. It's a continuum, and so I don't want to understand the whole thing, but I think we ought to know about some other management units that are nearby, that kind of thing too, that really are overlying and driving in our management. And so, and not just focusing on these, and so I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. So.
Okay, but then I guess at this point you'll have to vote no. But the discussion was closed and you called for the question, so all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
I'm not even opposing, I just haven't mentioned.
Okay. I'm sure what you're after will come down the road, but until we even know what township and range these lands are in, we're just having a conversation about. Yes, go ahead.
So I'm assuming the DNR can provide a map that shows the adjacent lands, you know, yeah, exactly.
Ready to go, guys, let's do it.
So, you know, those things will be in the orientation. I hope, you know, some of that will alleviate your issues, but, you know, that's part of the process, the orientation.
Yeah, I think it's over here.
Well, one other issue that occurs to me, well, I was going to say that the executive committee is going to have to meet in the interim to get specific about what they're presenting and what's happening and everything. Bill's got all this information. So information sharing and staffing is going to be really important. My basic point. I would like to. You took down my notes about the previous stuff.
I've tried, Toby.
It was very.
What's beautiful here is I can go and watch it right there.
One more issue that I think we should address that follows from Cindy. One of the benefits that needs to be thought about, not next month, but just one more, is the potential to monetize the carbon benefit. So I talk about looking for alternative sources of revenue, that's one.
Right.
I'll let Jason go first because he's been waiting, but I want to go back to.
All right, I have a specific data request about trust lands, which I'll say I have a copy to give to the secretary so we can include it, and either, if it's just part of a binder, that's just fine. I would just like to know it. I would like to know, I'll assume we're going to get a map of where these lands are. It's already in there, probably a basic starting point. The volume of timber promised in the previous sustainable harvest calculation. This is 10 years ago. A certain amount was promised by trust and by polygon, by RIU, FMU, whatever your unit of inventory that overlaps these trust lands.
It'll be sustainable harvest units, so we've got 2 of them that are relevant for Clallam County trust lands.
Okay.
One will be the Clallam County forest board lands that are outside the Olympic Experimental State Forest, and then there's a rolled up target for the Olympic Experimental State Forest, but not just Clallam County. So those are the 2 that will be immediately relevant.
Got it. For the, I have a couple others.
Okay, I just had a question for him, based on what he said.
Yeah.
We would, from my perspective, I think we would like the experimental forest trust lands that are Clallam County separated from the rest.
So I can give you numbers about what's been harvested in terms of OASF lands in Clallam County, but the target that exists is broader than that. There wasn't a specific Clallam County OASF lands target.
Well, after Jason's done, I have my own list. So
Okay.
Go ahead, Jason.
So for the volume of timber that was promised but not harvested, this is what at least some people will consider the arrearage. Any bid packs, FPA IDs that correspond to sales that were developed but not implemented and described, well, they'll have a location associated with them.
Yep.
For the arrearage volume without FPA numbers, this is the volume of timber that was promised but not promised in a model, this sustained harvest calculation, but not harvested. Any documentation as to why nothing happened, and just any documents you can provide as a road washed out. We could not access this. We wanted to put it up. The model said it would be there, but when we went out there, it had all blown down in 2007 in a December windstorm. And then for the volume of timber that was promised and harvested, I'd like the FPA numbers associated with those sales and their locations and the actual volume removed by the buyer. Now, I know that, I understand that that's a leap for you because it's not a DNR document, it is Department of Revenue document. I would assume you have.
We track it.
Okay, so those 5 things would be really helpful for me.
I'll get a copy of that. I'm trying to take notes quickly, but
I will hand it to the secretary.
Perfect.
Great. Thank you.
I should have brought that.
So as a tangent to that, there could be this optional field trip day where whoever wants to go can look at limitations, restrictions of Forest Practices Act, Fish Forest, whatever, out in the field. And so examples to some people, they think our county's all flat, steep slopes, riparian areas, things that are taking stuff out of the base. So we better understand the challenges.
Yeah, I can say we will be happy to organize a field visit, multiple field visits, whatever works. Probably both for weather purposes and for the purpose of getting everyone to a foundational level of understanding. I might suggest we wait until maybe March or April meeting to decide what we want to go see, because I can organize a whole bunch of different days in the field, talk about a whole bunch of different stuff.
Right. So a couple things that I would like. I'd like a complete set of maps for all of the trust lands.
Is that other than the...
Yeah, I'm looking at Instant 2000 scale. I would even actually like the shape files and polygons still going into there. I'd like an inventory by stand, if I could get that. A summary of age classes. If you can't do the summary of age classes, you just give me the inventory. I can do my own summary. I'd also like to know the acres in roads, the acres in what I call commercial forest. Those are the areas that can be managed. And the acres in non-forest, which include pits, fields, riparian areas, set-asides for that marbled murrelet or any of those types of things. And then I'd like to have some type of estimate of the discount that is taken by the federal HCP for the trust lands. So if you go, for example, and look at the harvest unit along 112 out there, it was harvested, the riparian areas were left, but then there were many trees, I'm going to say 4,000 to 10,000 board feet per acre that are just standing out there and blowing down. So we can say that if you tell me there's 100,000 feet available, I know that we're only going to harvest 80,000 board feet because of the peat tree requirements scattered throughout the unit.
So you just want to know, sort of a 100-acre polygon, what's the average retention for a DNR harvest?
Yeah, I would think you would already have that by polygon, or separated those polygons. So in other words, if you have these long sinuous polygons that are streams that are not included in the commercial forest, or do you have them included in the commercial forest and then deduct the acres and say that's really only 80 acres we can log out of that 100 or 75 or 70 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's going to be different. You're going to have a different set aside for riparian areas in the Olympic State Forest out by Clallam Bay than you are over by Squim, where there's significantly less streams per acre.
Correct. Yeah, so we have a streams layer that's easy. The 8 tree per acre wildlife requirement of the HCP, you can quantify. The slopes aspect of it won't be nearly as well mapped or as easily quantifiable, but we can try something.
Okay, and then how is this data accumulated? When you present a polygon, you say there's so many board feet per acre, trees per acre, and all the metrics that follow. Is that done by somebody that went into the field and actually measured it, or was it done by extrapolation? Because I measured this one, it looks like that one, so I'm going to call that one the same. So I guess it's your inventory based on 90% field sample or 20?
I don't know nearly enough detail about exactly what the inventory program looks like. If you're talking about a particular sale that we actually offer that goes in front of the board, that's been cruised for that point in time. And then, as Jason said, the Department of Revenue keeps the after, so you can compare what we cruised versus what was harvested. As far as the data that feeds into the sustainable harvest calculation, I can put you in touch with Peter Gould, who runs our inventory program. He can answer to the nth degree of detail.
Yeah, well, I just like the actual inventory.
We can give you a ton of GIS information that's got all this stuff.
No? I guess that's what you need to do. Great, I think those are important pieces of information, because that's the fundamentals of what we're talking about.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I can give you a list of that. Oh, I can Roger.
And the list would be wonderful because it just says discussion.
Okay.
On one.
Can I move for a new secretary?
4 minutes. Yes! All those in favor of putting Kyle as secretary. But I would like to, you've got January, I would ask that we also consider the February meeting, talk about the constraints, the habitat conservation plan, the environmental regulations, SEPA, those type of things. Because once you know what the land base is, it's a really false assumption saying, oh, now we can go harvest all of that because they do it in the private sector. Well, there's a set of rules and regulations that are different for DNR that that I think we would need to explain. And I also think we're going to have to invite a few folks to come and help with that. And from Fish and Wildlife, and that's why I'm asking that would be kind of the focus of the February meeting, because then we can get those invitations out. Or at least say we want to discuss environmental rules of Fish and Wildlife, HCP, et cetera, and try to weigh in the people we need for that meeting.
I don't have any problem with that. I suggest that that meeting also needs the backgrounder on arrearage and the various interpretations of what it means.
I might suggest that's a third meeting topic. If the first meeting is going to be some of the basic facts and figures about DNR,
I'll defer to the state.
The topic of environmental regulations is complex, and
Fine, I'll defer to you on that.
Right, and they change, you know, if you go to different units, they change, so it's not like this size fits everywhere.
Well, I'm speaking about the arrearage as a driver for what's happening here. Knowing what people think it means is really important.
Up versus and supervises 600 attorneys in Olympia, you gotta find one that can come up here.
I don't think they will.
no.
Trust us, a few of us have asked for this. So I think
There's a lot of information that we're going to be able to provide about many things that folks want to hear about, but bringing a DNR attorney up here to waive attorney-client privilege to talk about their opinion of what arrearage is and isn't is not something we're going to do.
So,
You have access to multiple presentations that I've given to the Board of Natural Resources talking about arrearage. There's a lot of information that I will be able to bring and others can share their perspective on it. But I'm not going to put one of my attorneys in the room here to talk about their position on it.
The two attorneys who normally don't agree on a lot or find ourselves agreeing a lot today. We're thinking that if you have that meeting on arrearage, if there is the one to have that discussion, there are 3 or 4 attorneys who have different positions on this, some similar, some radically different, that might be worth talking about. Two of those 3 or 4 are sitting here in the room. The other is like Ann Forrest Burns, and there's another one of our colleagues that probably would have a slightly different position from the Washington Environmental Forest Law Center. And I mean, I think you'd have 4 attorneys from 2 different perspectives with 2 different positions therein. And we have to make those invitations. So that might just be something we keep in mind. That is what the committee is wanting to hear. I think, 15 minutes aside or something.
Yeah, it's not a lengthy, it's just presenting the history of that statute and what we think it means.
Because there's no court case, there's
nothing.
Really not even a good AG opinion. So possibly that type of thing could be on the website with a link for us to go to instead of having a lot of people travel. And whatever is okay by the attorneys to put on the website by a link, then they're not going to discuss further.
There are 2 or 3 PowerPoints I've given to the board that have relevant statutes.
And those of us that need the homework can do it without taking up.
I agree.
I would like to move that if January is centered largely on learning about lands, that February be titled, I guess, the constraints or the restrictions on managing the land, and that be the focus, and be.
Second motion.
Okay.
Just a second, were you
With,
done?
then trying to keep in mind the schedule. If March contained a discussion about then the legalese or the legal ramifications of a rearage, also the trust mandate, and perhaps if it's an issue of management, also it might be nice to have somebody from Grace Harbor County come up, since that's the one county that has kept its lands out of trust, and talk where the alternative is, if one of the things we're talking about is re-conveyance, the consequence of re-conveyance is acting like Grace Harbor County in managing your own lands, and it might be nice to know what the county would be in for if they did that. And that seems to go with just a discussion of arrearage volumes, and after we already know what the restrictions are and what the restriction implications would be if the county owned, basically owned their lands, they're not managing it, if the county actively managed their own lands. So that would be a February and March primary focus. And then a interim report seems pretty, with those three things under our hat, an interim report seems reasonable. We would all have some knowledge of what's happened, what might happen, and what the consequences of something happening might be. So I guess the first motion is that February be the primary focus of February be restrictions on management, HCP, other forest practices, HCP, and those kinds of issues that govern management of the lands. And then, well, I'll leave it at that, just for February.
So you don't have March in there?
Okay, I will make March as a talk about arrearage, the legal all of the real legal aspects, trust mandate, how the trust mandate might differ for the lands that were acquired through tax forfeiture versus lands that were deeded by Congress. I would like to hear from Grace Harbor County and see their revenues to see if they're not paying 30 cents on the dollar premium to manage their land.
Yeah.
Are they getting anything? I mean, is that coming back to them in a good way for their libraries, hospitals, fire departments, and schools?
Yeah, is that value added?
Yeah. So I guess, February, management policies and restrictions, and March, I guess legal would be the primary focus with, that's a broad one, but that was my proposal.
Okay. I have something to say, but before that, is there a second?
There was one for part of it, I thought Kyle seconded.
I will second the motion in its entirety.
Read that back.
One comment to Mike, I think having the attorneys here to explain that law is going to be way more helpful to the group than all of us to go read it and make our own interpretations. We have that option as well, but that's their job. So I think we should ask them if they would be willing to do that. You have your hand up, I believe.
No, I was just agreeing that it would be good to hear from Grace Harbor to see what that value added is for the management and how that works before we would ever determine whether or not we would propose something. We would want to see what other effects there are down the road, I think.
Correct. Any other discussion? So let me see if I get the motion right, and I'll call for the question. The January meeting, we would focus on education as it relates to the trust lands, the county trust lands that are managed by DNR. February, we would focus on the regulations, the restrictions, the HCG, forest practices, rules and regulations, fire rules and regulations, and all of those ancillary things that affect management of the forest lands. And in March, we would deal with the arrearage, talk to the folks from Grace Harbor County to see how their management is going and other legal issues that may have been overlooked. Is that pretty much it? Yes.
Just so folks understand, one of the things that I'll want to come on the table in the third meeting is the sort of complicated relationship of if you want to return to something other than HCP management, some considerations there.
Oh, yeah, the status of the permit, that's what we really should. That's a good one.
Any other discussion here?
So it could be part of 3, but I'm curious, what would be the economic impact on the Forks with change in management of DNR? What would be the charge possibly to the county for re-conveyance for a multi-million-dollar infrastructure, well-ballasted roads, all of the infrastructure put in by DNR, probably as an investment, maybe it goes with the asset, I don't know. But a discussion of that, what might be the charge back to the county? Thirdly, how do you handle wildfire on if they were Clallam County forests? And how do you build up the infrastructure to fight forest fire in light of climate change, species change, all the things that are going to happen because of the climate over, say, 50 years, 100, a reasonable amount of time if you took over. So some of those sort of socio-economic / economic impacts.
Okay, well,
So
let's just go ahead.
I think, and I agree that that would perfectly fit under asking Grace Harbor, talking to Grace Harbor County, who has to deal with all of those things. Their lands are interchanged with other lands, they have to deal with fire. So it's a great large topic, and I think would fall naturally.
I would point out that we paid 30% of the value of the timber to DNR over all these years, so the roads go with the land.
I had someone to take notes. My office has been calling me urgently. I think the committee ignored. They're saying you need an answer, so.
Process question.
Go ahead.
So Jason made a motion before the primary focus was in January to be at the county trust limits managed by the DNR.
Yes.
So then, and then Ken seconded the motion, so we never voted on it. And then Jason made
I
another.
think we did.
That one voted.
That one voted.
Okay, because I didn't get the voting on it. So then now you've made another motion.
For February to be
February, and March, we got all 3 months together,
Yep.
and that motion has been seconded.
Right, but the first motion was only for January.
Yes.
Correct. And now this motion is for February and March.
Okay.
So all those in favor of that schedule, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Did you have something else, Jason?
No, we're cruising along, really. Just start writing the report now.
Yeah.
Are we almost to the end?
Yeah, we're getting right close to the end, but go ahead, do you have something to say?
Well, it's under Robert's rules, it's called a point of personal privilege. I think that we should have tense, so with names, I can't see your name.
I can't see yours either. I was going to suggest that too. I don't really think we need a motion for that, though.
No, that's why it's
Needs
no,
part
it's a point of personal privilege.
Yes, I think that's an excellent idea.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I think those 3 meetings is a good chunk of meat. I think people's opinions about what should happen after that will largely be dictated by what happens at those first 3 meetings. I would suggest that we don't try and tackle this any further to that.
Right.
No motion now. We need a motion, no motion now.
I don't think we need a motion to not do anything.
I'm concerned though that because I don't think we're going to have the work done by February to do a draft report. I think we really need to go back to commissioners and ask for more time at this point, because I think that when we deal with all 3 of those things, we'll have a better position.
I guess,
I don't want to go to January and tell them that we can't get the report done by February. I'm going to do it now.
that's true, but I guess the nature of the report is something I was wondering about. Is this a report that says, here's where we are? Or is this a report that says, here's what we're recommending? Because if we're going to do a report about what we're going to recommend, then we're not going to have that in February at all. But if they just want to know what you need done, I think we can do that. So.
Provide an interim written report by February 15th. I don't think we're going to have it. I think we need to do it now. Just tell them we're not going to get it done.
Did you notice that?
I don't think it's enough time.
No.
We need to have a quarter under our belt
Yeah.
in order to make an interim report so that we're all on the same playing field.
Okay.
So I make a motion that we tell the commissioners that April 15th will have
Okay, good with
an
that.
interim report.
Is there a second on that, Tom?
Pardon me?
Second. With Brad on, is somebody ready?
I'm taking it.
Okay.
Good. Yours is better because it's computer.
Okay.
But I'll put this on there.
Okay. So it's moved and seconded that we request the county commissioners to move the first interim report to April 15th instead of February. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Is there anything else we need to talk about before we open it up for public comments? Hearing none, are there folks in the audience that would like to speak?
First of all, thank you so much for serving on this committee. Transparency is important to me, and that's why the camera is here. So just a couple things I wanted to mention to you all. You all talked about Phil Kitchell's report, which was given to the work session on 12/14, which was Monday. If you'd like to hear Phil Kitchell's report, you can go to the card I gave you, and you can listen to it. It's at the end of that session, so you know it's in the last 20-25 minutes. What I do is I put the agenda up, I timestamp it, so if you just look at the agenda, see Phil Kitchell's name, hit the timestamp, it'll take you right to it. Okay? So that'll help you a lot unless you like to read all the papers that Peach talked about. Okay, so that should help you a whole lot. Just a few reminders that you are not just talking to each other in this room. Certainly the last person in the room is very important, but the people who are going to be watching this, those people who can't get here from the very far west or the far east, right? They want to know what's going on in our county. So try to speak up and loud, and remember, if you want to make emphasis on something, talk to the camera, because believe me, they're going to get it, okay? So, also, another thing that happens in all board meetings, an example, and I'm not picking on the school board, but I'm using you as an example. People will talk about PASD. You have to think for a minute, what's PASD? That's the Port Angeles School District. But you've used letters and vegetable soup all day today here. Again, the people who are listening don't know what they are. So take the moment, please, to explain it for them, because they're the people who are working for it. So, polygon, board feet per acre, whatever it is. So they're just the general.
Thank you.
My name is Norma Turner. I live on Mount Angeles Road in Port Angeles. And actually, I have 3 issues I wanted to cover. One is the role of the Charter Commission, the Grace Harbor, and Mr. Kitchell's report to the Board of Commissioners. There's been a lot of press given to the Clallam County Charter Review Commission recommendation to form this committee. Frankly, much of the information I don't even recognize. I was the former chair of that commission. I was one of the 4 no votes to send this recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. It's not that I didn't think it was an important issue, I just believed the charter was not the appropriate mechanism. And it was my view that if there was a broad-based citizen concern about this issue, they should form a coalition, go directly to the commissioners, and ask for this kind of task force to be put together. So I was really perplexed why the charter was even used for this mechanism. So in that piece, I had a private discussion with one of the members that was working on this issue, is about how did this go through the charter instead of doing a public coalition. And the response was, well, because all the folks promoting this issue have timber issues, and we want it to appear like it came from a public, nonpartisan group. So I challenge all of you to look at the minutes or watch the videos of the charter. There is very little substantive discussion at that Charter Review Commission. The discussions were held and came out of a subcommittee. By our own rules, we could not have a majority of our members on a subcommittee, so it was a small group of folks. So I'm just always amazed, kind of the quotes about, so I would say take with a grain of salt that the Charter Commission said X or Y, because there's a lot that they didn't say that's been attributed to them. I wanted to go on to Grace Harbor. We were told in the charter, well, Grace Harbor does it, so that's why we should look at moving toward that. There was no real discussion about what that means to Grace Harbor. So I researched recent data on Grace Harbor because the proponents of re-conveyance have told us it will be an economic boom for Clallam County. So let's look at the data about how our two counties match up. The population base is almost equal, a difference of less than 1,000. In 2014, population growth in Grays Harbor was minus 2.7%. Clallam County was a plus 1%. Persons living in poverty in Grays Harbor was 19%, and Clallam is 14.6%. Clallam has a higher retail sales per capita and a slightly higher rate of ownership, home ownership rate. And in October 2014, according to the Fed's reserve figures, unemployment was higher in Grays Harbor at 7.5% than Clallam was at 7%. So obviously, they may be doing fine taking care of their timberlands, but it has not been the economic boom that we were told it would bring to Clallam County. So when you talk about Grays Harbor, I think you need to make sure you look at our two counties in some comparison. And also, this week, in conclusion, I sat at the board meeting, the work session for the Board of Commissioners, and listened to Mr. Kitchell's report. And I was a little dismayed when I listened because there are a lot of numbers, but there was no overlay on what were the economic conditions at any particular time as to how the DNR sales went. It's just either they're down or they're up. In fact, Commissioner Chapman took Mr. Kitchell to task for that. I also was a little dismayed because frequently the default position was laid at the politics. I was looking for a Joe Friday approach, just give me the facts. But as an example, Mr. Kitchell admitted that all three of the elected DNR lands commissioners dating back to the 90s have declined to cut old growth timber, even though obviously Mr. Kitchell thinks it should be cut. Rather than laying out the reasons for those three commissioners that had very different views of management, but came up with a singular view, what were their reasons? When he was asked, he defaulted to, well, it was politics. So when you give Mr. Kitchell's report, I urge you to be diligent, look at what it has and what it doesn't have, because the report that I heard at the work session was disappointing at best. Thank you all for your work, and I wish you well. If you have other questions about the charter, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Go ahead. I introduced myself earlier, but I'm just again, Clallam County, Joyce resident, property owner. And I'm very interested in this subject. I plan to be at all these meetings except possibly in February. But I have a question for the committee. Will the maps and the information packets that you people have, will those be available to the public? And my second question to the presenters, will people in the audience be able to ask questions to the presenters that you bring in?
Okay. I think as far as questions goes, that would be up to the group. I would prefer that the discussions in the group be among the group, and that public comments be public comments and not intermixed the two, or we'll essentially have a committee of hundreds. As far as making the maps available and the inventory available, that's up to the group to decide that. I'm fine with it. But I really think that the discussions that we're having that are going to form a decision or not, the decision should be confined and limited to the group, the committee. Yes.
I agree with that. However, there's such a thing as notes.
But they're public records.
That's fine. Just say, well, please ask a question that's in the text, right?
Okay. You see someone else with their hand up? Okay.
Yeah, Tim McNulty, Lost Pond Lane, Squim, landowner adjacent DNR. I just want to endorse Mike Doherty's request that the committee proceeds very slowly. This is a huge deal, very complicated, lots going on. I think that the next 3 months focused on education efforts that you've laid out sounds like a good approach. And I'm reminded of the LWA Citizens Advisory Committee. Some of you may remember the committee convened pretty unanimously opposed to dam removal by the end of a long process of talking to agency people, scientists, economists, tribal people, really kind of changed their minds and helped issue one of the great restoration psychological institutions in the county's history. You have an effort to really address some important issues here, and just once again asking you to take it slowly and consider many signs. So thanks very much.
Other comments? Okay.
Paul Sextro, 573 Kitchen Dick Road in Swim. I just wanted to thank you for your openness in considering expanding the committee membership to 20. And I personally think that it's not how many members are on the committee, but it's what the members say is going to determine the outcome of this. So the more diverse, the better. Secondly, I had a question, and I don't know if it's directed to Mr. Peach or to Joe, is the schedule of events between now and January. As I understand it, you voted to recommend expanding the committee to 20 to the Board of Commissioners. Will the Board of Commissioners then take that up this year at the next Commissioners meeting and vote yea or nay?
It'll be discussed Monday at the work session, and then for a formal action that involves a change to the original authorizing documents, it has to be on the agenda for a Commissioners meeting. If I get it on Tuesday, it'll be there.
So it's possible that if additional people would be approved to be reseated, or be additionally seated, it would be the January meeting.
Yeah, I mean,
is that the target?
That was a question I asked, yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Other comments?